Hi, this is Nadine with DIY Sweets. Today I'm going to show you how to make a red velvet Oreo cookie brownie. This is so good, you're going to love it. The first thing we need to do is we need to make the ganache that is going to be part of this recipe. To do that, I'm going to take this 2½ cups of heavy cream or whipping cream, and I'm going to put it in the microwave, and I want to bring it to just boiling. I don't want it to boil hard, I just want to bring it to boiling. It goes in the microwave, and I'm going to start it for like 2 minutes. After that 2 minutes, I will check it, and because it's in the microwave, I want to stir it when I check it, because in the microwave you can get hot pockets and pockets that aren't so hot, and I don't want some areas that are super heated. So I'm going to stir it after the 2 minutes, and then I will continue cooking it in about half-minute intervals, stirring it in between until it comes to a boil. I'll be back with you in 2 minutes. Alright, this is now gone for 2 minutes. I want to take this out and stir it. Once I've stirred it to make sure there's no hot pockets, and I'm going to feel that, that feels pretty warm, so I want to do it now for just 30-second intervals. If it was still cool, I probably want to do it for another minute, but this feels pretty warm. We're going to put it back in the microwave, and we're going to give it another half a minute. I'm going to keep doing this in half-a-minute increments. When it's boiling, I'll come back and I'll show you what we do next. The last time I took it out, it was steaming, so I think it's getting really close to boiling. So I want to watch it now so that as soon as it boils, I can pull it out, even if the half a minute isn't up. It has just started boiling. We're going to bring this out. We're going to take this whipping cream and we're going to pour it onto our chocolate. Once we have it poured on, all we want to do is just make sure all the chocolate is covered. Don't stir it at this point. Once you make sure all the chocolate is covered, you want to let this sit for about a minute. I'll be back with you in a minute when this has set. This is now set for 1 minute. All we're going to do is we're going to take our spoon and stir this. Right now you'll notice it's really milky. As we stir it, it's going to turn into a nice, rich chocolate ganache. Notice it's getting a little bit more brown as we stir it. I'm not doing a real vigorous stir, I'm just stirring it in. We're going to continue to stir this until it is nice and smooth and shiny. All of this chocolate should eventually turn into a nice rich ganache. Usually you don't need to heat it up anymore, but sometimes the chocolate may not totally melt in the cream. And if that's the case, then you just stick it all in the microwave for like 15 seconds and see if that's enough. But first you want to stir it until it's basically all looks like it's mixed in. You can't tell at this point whether or not it's all going to melt. The only way you'll know that it all did not melt is when you have it looking shiny and none of the milky look, but all of it the rich chocolatey look. And then if you still have lumps in it, you'll know that some of it didn't melt. But right now we're still stirring. trying to get it to be a nice, smooth, rich ganache. The reason we wanted to make this ganache ahead of time is because we want to stick this in the fridge so that it can become spreadable. Because that's what we're going to do, is spread it on the brownies. Now, it doesn't have to be as thick as buttercream. It can be a little bit soft because it goes on top of the Swiss Merengue buttercream. But we still want it to be where it's not a pure liquid, because we don't want it to soak into the Swiss Merengue buttercream. Now you see we're getting a nice rich ganache, but if you look carefully, there's still some lumps in it. So I'm going to stick this back in the microwave for just about 15 seconds, and that should be enough to melt that last little bit of chocolate. All right, I put this back in the microwave for about 15 seconds. Now I'm going to stir it some more, see if I can get the last little bit of the solid chocolate to dissolve. If not, then I would just stick it back in for just another 15 seconds. But I don't want to overheat the chocolate, because chocolate can burn really easy. And that's why I just put it in for a small amount of time. And that is how simple making the chocolate ganache is. Now, when I measured out my chocolate, it looked like chocolate chips, but it really wasn't chocolate chips. You can get baking chocolate in chip form, but you really do want to make sure you're getting baking chocolate and not chocolate chips. Because chocolate chips have something in them that makes it so that they don't totally melt all the way, so that you still have the chip in the cookie. And so it doesn't work quite as well in a ganache. All right, this is mixed in. It's nice and smooth and it's shiny. Now all we're going to do is stick this in the fridge, and it's just going to be there a couple hours until we're ready to put it onto the red velvet Oreo cookie brownies that we're going to make next. We're ready now to make the red velvet brownie part of our brownies. I've prepared the pan by spraying down the sides with a vegetable spray and then putting a silicone mat on the bottom. I have also turned the oven on so it is preheating to 350 degrees. The next thing I want to do is sift all of my dry ingredients together so that they're ready when it's time to add them to the brownie mixture. I'm going to take my flour, my cocoa, my salt and my baking powder, and put it in this sieve. Then all I do is with the spoon, I kind of push the stuff and stir it around, and it goes right through the sieve. And this works so much faster than a sifter, and it's hardly no effort at all. With that done, I'm ready to start the rest of my stuff. Meet me over at the stove and I'll show you what we do next. The first thing I want to do is I want to whisk my eggs slightly. So I just do a slight whisk, just enough to get the egg yolks and the whites combined and the egg yolks all broken up. That way I don't need to spend time breaking up the egg yolks and the white when I mix it in with the rest of the stuff. We're ready now to melt the butter. So in the saucepan, we're going to melt the butter over medium heat. Once we have the butter completely melted, then we'll remove it from the heat and we'll stir in the other ingredients. I kind of like to sort of stir when I'm melting butter because then it doesn't just sit in one spot, and it seems to help melt it faster by having it move around. You don't have to do that. If you want, you could just let it sit there, walk away, and come back. So you see our butter is melting. Still have a little ways to go. This is almost melted. Just going to stir it a teeny bit, try to get the last little bit, make sure it's making contact with the bottom so it can melt. As soon as I see all the butter is totally melted, then we remove it from the heat. We've removed the butter from the heat. We're ready now to add the ingredients to it. We are first going to add the vanilla, the eggs, and the sugar. We also want to add our red food coloring. Now we just want to stir this until it's well blended. With that all mixed in, we're now ready to add our dry ingredients that we sifted earlier. Now the reason why this told you to melt the butter in a large saucepan is so that you wouldn't have to switch it to another pan or another bowl later to mix this up. By using the large saucepan, we can do all the mixing in the one bowl. Now we just want to stir this and mix it up until it's all mixed in. Brownies you usually do not beat with a beater. They are usually stirred by hand. Because brownies are of a lot heavier consistency than cake, so we're not trying to beat air into it. We're just trying to thoroughly mix the ingredients together. You'll notice how that is all mixed together. All we're going to do now, we're going to take our pan and we're going to pour our brownie batter into the pan. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm using a silicone mat on the bottom. I like to do that because it pretty much guarantees that this is not going to stick. Once I've got all the stuff in there, I just want to spread this batter out evenly. Don't want any real high spots. I want it all to be very evenly distributed and all the way to the ends. So you just got to kind of eyeball it. Make sure that it's all evenly distributed. We're going to put this in the oven and then we're going to bake it for 25 to 30 minutes. You'll notice the rack is in the middle position. We're just going to take our brownie batter and stick it in the oven and then set our timer for 25 minutes. That's going to cook now for 25 minutes. Then we'll check it, and if the toothpick comes out clean, we'll be ready to take it out, and then it'll need to cool. Our brownies have beeped. We're going to now check to see if they're done. All we do to check to see if they're done is we stick a toothpick in, and I usually poke it in several spots. And you'll notice it comes out dry. We're ready to take this out and put it on a cooling rack. Once it's cooled, we'll be ready to do the rest of the brownies, adding the Swiss Merengue buttercream and the Ganache. We're now ready to make the Swiss Merengue buttercream. We're going to add to this pan some sugar and some egg whites. And we just want to stir this with a wire whisk, basically until the sugar's dissolved and it's reached 115 degrees. You want to do this over a double boiler so that you're not cooking the eggs. That's also why you want to be whisking it consistently. Basically, we're looking for the sugar grains to have dissolved completely. And that's around 115 degrees. As you look at this, you can see it's basically dissolved and it's right at 115 degrees. What we're going to do now is we're going to put this into our stand mixer. We're going to pour this into our bowl. We have it in the bowl with the whisk attachment attached, and we're just going to beat this on high speed until it's thick, glossy, and white in color. The peaks should be really firm, and then we'll be ready for the next step. You can see it's starting to turn really white. You still want to mix it a little bit longer because when I bring that down, you can see that's not really forming stiff peaks yet. So we'll just keep going till it's forming stiff peaks. Let's just bring this down, scrape down the bowl. See, it's still not forming the stiff peaks. But we do want to make sure we scrape down the bowl so all of it's getting incorporated well. Okay. Those are making soft peaks, but the peaks are falling. Usually when you're doing stiff peaks, you want the peak, but those peaks are sticking up. But these peaks are sticking up. Okay, so you'll see there that we have some peaks that are sticking up really good in the center, and then we've got, it's not sticking up quite so well on the side. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to kind of mix them together and then just beat it for like another half a minute or so to get them incorporated. We have that stiff peak right there. What we're going to do now, I'm going to just dump the powdered sugar in. And then we want it to get all incorporated into that. If I turn this back up on a high speed, we're going to have a powdered sugar shower. So I'm going to cover this with this, and I'm just going to turn it on very low. We're just going to let this slowly incorporate that powdered sugar. You'll see it slowly picking up more and more of the powdered sugar. Once all of the powdered sugar is pretty much in there, we will turn the speed up to medium to get it to mix in. I want to stop this for a minute because I want to make sure I scrape down so there's no powdered sugar still on the side and it's all very well incorporated. So we have this turned to medium-high. And now that the powdered sugar is mixed in, we're going to add the fat. And we want to add them a little bit, one at a time, but we want to add them quickly. So we're going to start with the butter. Just drop it in, and drop that in, and then we're going to scrape in the shortening. Then we're just going to mix this in. I'm going to turn this off for a minute because I can see some butter's not getting down in there. And I want it all to get mixed in, so I want to scrape all of my fats down. Now we're just going to mix it all in. And then at the very end, we're just going to add our vanilla. Scrape that down again, because we want the vanilla totally incorporated into the frosting. Now we just mix it till it's all incorporated in. And there you have the Swiss Merengue buttercream. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to grind up the Oreo cookies because they go into the buttercream. And we don't want them ground up fine. We want them to be kind of coarse. So I'm not going to use a food processor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a gallon size Ziploc bag and I'm going to put the Oreo cookies in there and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. We want to crush the whole package of Oreo cookies. So I'm going to take a bag and I'm just taking out one row of cookies at a time. You know, the cookies come in 3 rows. And I'm only going to do 1 row at a time. And then I seal my bag shut, spread the cookies out as close to single layer as possible. And then with the rolling pin, I just break them apart, roll it back and forth until it's the consistency that I like it. You can also use a mallet and pound them, but I just kind of like the rolling pin better. The reason I don't use the food processor is it does crush them a little bit finer than I want them crushed. I want to be able to tell that I have Oreo cookies on my brownies. Okay, once I have them crushed, I just dump them in to this bowl. And it may not dump as easy as you want because it does have that cream filling. And that cream filling does like to stick. If you just kind of work with the bag, even that will come out pretty much. Then I just repeat the process with the rest of the cookies. Now that I have all of this ground up, I'm going to get my Swiss Merengue buttercream that I mixed up. I now want to dump all but about ½ a cup of the cookies in. And it doesn't have to be exact. Basically, the amount you're not putting in is what you're going to sprinkle on top. And then we just want to stir this till it's all mixed in. Now with that mixed in there, we're ready to spread this onto our cold brownies. So let me bring the brownies over here. Here's our brownies. All we're going to do is we're going to take our Swiss Merengue buttercream and stick it on the brownies. And then we're going to spread it around. We actually need to have this cover all of the brownies, so it's not going to be a really thick coat. But that's okay because we are putting, besides this, we are putting some chocolate ganache on top of this. So we're just spreading this around till we've completely covered the brownies. What we want to do now is we want to put this in the freezer for about a half an hour. We want this butter in the buttercream frosting to harden up enough that when we put the ganache on it, they will stay separate pieces and they won't all mix together. I'm going to put this in the freezer for about a half an hour and then we'll be back. Our brownies have been in the freezer now for about a half an hour. We're ready now to add the ganache to the top. All we do is we spoon the ganache onto our brownie. And then we spread it around. Again, we don't need a real thick coating. This is already a really rich brownie. But we do want it to be completely covering the Swiss Merengue buttercream. This does not need to be stored in the fridge. The only reason we put it in the fridge before is because we wanted the Swiss Merengue buttercream to become hard. Once you have this totally spread on to the desired thickness, you're going to take this leftover Oreo cookies and just sprinkle it on top. And you can kind of spread it around a little bit if you see some spots have a lot more than others. We have the Oreo cookies on there. Now we're going to just sprinkle some chocolate chips. And the one thing I like to do with the chocolate chips, just kind of take them and push them a little bit in. This is just so that it's not going to fall apart and it's going to stay with the cookie. And if you see an area that doesn't have as much, just sprinkle a little bit more on there. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to take our white chocolate. I just have it in a squeeze bottle, and I'm just going to drizzle this onto the cookies, onto the brownies. And I don't need a whole lot, just enough to make it look decorative, so I do it go in different directions. And then I'm going to do the same thing with our dark chocolate. And there you have our red velvet Oreo cookie brownies. I'm gonna let this set up. I might put it back in the fridge 5-10 minutes, just long enough to set up the chocolate, and then I'll be ready to take it out of the pan and present it. How many brownies you get out of this really does depend on how big you decide to cut them. What I like to do is just kind of very lightly mark off where I think I want to do and see if that's going to be about right. You can measure them exactly, but since I'm just having them for home, I'm not that worried about them all being the same size. So I'm thinking I want to just start cutting here, and you need to cut all the way through. And I'm just going to take a couple out. And these do not need to be stored in the refrigerator. Chances are, as good as they are, they're only going to last a day or two anyway. You might would need to store them there if you were not going to eat them all in a day or two. But they're fine at room temperature. Here is our red velvet Oreo cookie brownies.